Watching Hisoka is like watching Game of Thrones jammed into a single character. Sex, violence, questionable moral actions, intrigue, and power. He is undoubtedly one of the most iconic characters in the history of anime. And if you've taken away anything from the videos on this channel, it's that popular characters are successful because the author put a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into creating them. As we will see, Hisoka gives you goosebumps, not because he's cool or strong, or because his bungee gum has the properties of both gum and rubber. No, Hisoka is so damn intriguing because of the psychological tactics that Togashi tied up in his personality, using Hisoka not only as a character, but as a storytelling device that makes 𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚘 what it is today. And so Hisoka is purposefully designed not only to manipulate the characters around him, but also to manipulate you, dear viewer, which is why you love the story so much. This might well be the most challenging character analysis I've done so far. So buckle up. This is the story of Hisoka Morow.
おやおや、これは予期せぬお客さんだ。久しぶり。
If I had to break it down into one sentence, Hisoka is a manipulative, combat-addicted, and powerful player in the world of 𝚘𝚘𝚗𝚘, only acting on what gives him the most pleasure. The apex of hedonism. That were actually two sentences? Yeah, okay. Part of Hisoka's charm comes from the fact that we barely know anything about his past. The only hint we ever get is that Hisoka grew up in poverty, coming to cherish even the humblest of luxuries, such as a piece of bungee gum.
って名前は僕が子供の頃大好きだったチューインガムの名前から。
Now, since this piece of information comes from Hisoka himself, however, it's unclear if we can actually trust the most manipulative person in anime history with being completely honest about his own past. As we will explore in a moment, however, it's very plausible that he indeed did have quite a tragic past. And in this context, I also want to briefly mention Hisoka's past as provided by Sui Ishida, the author of Tokyo Ghoul. While not canon, Togashi has acknowledged it and might be working around it in the future. And so, in case you're not familiar with it, we get a short story about a heavily injured Hisoka being taken in by a circus troupe. How did he get injured? Where did he come from? Where was he going? We have no idea. All we know, according to Hisoka, is that his mother apparently had some sort of proficiency in illusionist arts, teaching him how to use playing cards in various ways. Working with the troupe, it becomes clear that Hisoka was an absolute prodigy, extremely confident in his own capabilities, and able to learn new skills, including Nen, at an incredible speed.
念についてどこまで習った
He gets involved with the murderous doings of the troupe's leader, who murders people for pleasure. And he even forms a sort of relationship with one of the group's members, while at the same time simply enjoying his own growth and dominance over others. And in the end, regardless of Hisoka's real intentions or efforts, he found himself with little to no option but to kill the troupe's leader and walk away. And so in the end, it was actually Hisoka who put an end to the leader's serial killings, all while showing off his own cruel and pleasure-driven side, perfectly summing up his character. It's quite unclear in the story, however, whether he does so out of a sense of morale or due to his own desire to fight and get stronger. But whatever the reason is, it would seem that he's destined to find and kill strong opponents. Not only does his own twisted desire compel him to seek them out, but even if he attempts a peaceful life, the bloodshed will find him. And I think that this shows really well that the truth behind Hisoka's hedonism might very well be some sort of trauma from his past, turning him into the sort of cult psychopath he's now. And while, yeah, Hisoka is a really cool character, I hope it doesn't come as too big of a surprise that the man has a pretty severe personality disorder. I do talk a bit more about this in detail in my analysis of Sukuna, a very similar type of character, if you want to learn more about the psychology behind this. The baseline, however, is this. Hedonism, in other words, fulfilling your every desire, is not the same thing as happiness. By focusing solely on the present moment without any regard for future consequences, Hisoka completely stays clear of ever thinking back to his past. Through combat, however, not only can he gain control about who gets to hurt him, but he can also dominate people in return and get a sense of importance and purpose, all while delivering a show for the audience. Thus, the true drive to Hisoka's character is satisfying his own desires, which is mostly finding and fighting powerful people. After all, he is a true tactical genius and a phenomenal martial artist. However, I think the best way to understand Hisoka is actually by looking at his Nen abilities. Just like Killua, Hisoka also belongs to the transmuter category. Its users are said to be deceptive, fickle, and driven by desire. And I think there is probably no other character that fits this description better than our psychopathic clown. First of all, deception. Hisoka is arguably the best liar in the series, not only in the art of making false but believable statements, but in crafting meticulous, intricate webs of deception that completely obscure the truth. Actually, Hisoka literally means secretive in Japanese, so you know it's one of the most defining traits of his character. He is a true master of manipulating people both in and outside of combat, often putting layers of lies on top of each other. Hisoka does so to divert attention, create openings, hide his own weaknesses, and sometimes simply making his opponents suffer. A great example for this is his battle with Castro. Here also, he willingly sacrifices his arms to create an opening, divert attention, and using his bungee gum, pretends to have supernatural powers, while at the same time hiding the fact that he actually did injure himself. All of this is to throw his opponent into utter madness, forcing him to lose his cool and humiliating him in front of the audience, which ultimately leads to Castro's demise. Hisoka also predicted that Castro would die dancing. Now quite understand. Huh? What's up?
I'll watch your work. Oh, you cut your side.
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
Thanks. Hisoka also predicted that Castro would die dancing. Quite understandably, Castro didn't believe the words of a notorious liar and didn't give it much thought. Meanwhile, people who have come to know this aspect of Hisoka, such as Gon and Killua, may find themselves easily trusting of his words at face value, only to find it all to be a facade in the end. In true transmuter fashion, only Hisoka himself knows for certain what is truth and what is lie.
ここへ何しに来たの?
さて、どうするか。話せばこの二人のことだ。
Now Hisoka is also extremely fickle. Often, what used to be a year-long obsession of his can become irrelevant for him in mere moments, like with Castro or his infiltration of the Phantom Troop. And of course, the most defining trait of Hisoka is being driven and motivated by desire. No matter if it's becoming a member of the world's most dangerous criminal organization in order to challenge their leader, or grooming young boys into becoming stronger hunters just so he can fight them in the future, Hisoka is never deterred from getting what he wants. Injury, failure, and even death only seem to make it all the more fun for him. This hedonism is expressed by Hisoka in so many ways, but I want to look at two aspects of this in particular here: sex and violence. Let's start with the latter. Hisoka is literally addicted to fighting, as in he can't live without it. And in this context, I think it's worth taking a look at his relationship with the protagonist.
君も合格。そのプレートは君に預ける。
Despite the differences between Gon and Hisoka, the two find themselves inextricably drawn to each other. On the surface, both appear to be opposites, right down to Hisoka's appearance as a scary clown, the mortal enemy of prepubescents everywhere. But as the show continues, their differences blur into similarity. Both Gon and Hisoka share the classic shonen trope of the warrior. These are characters abnormally proficient in battle, learn fast, and are able to tolerate immense pain, even deriving a seemingly unhealthy, almost addictive level of pleasure from it. Other such examples include Kenpachi from Bleach, Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, and of course Goku and Vegeta from the Dragon Ball franchise. For these types of characters, there seems to be little to no choice. Everything in their life seems to lead them towards combat, even if they try to avoid it. This desire to better one's powers and define one's entire existence through battle are not unique to Hunter x Hunter. However, while most shonen tend to avoid the problems associated with this stance, Togashi calls out this issue by making it a central part of both Gon's and Hisoka's characters. They enjoy fighting because it gives them a sense of importance, having people notice and fear them, and gaining a sense of control. They have the power to have an actual impact on the world. As a great example of this, let's return to the fight in the Heaven's Arena, where Hisoka, without any real need to do so, sacrifices an arm to prove his superiority, satisfy his desire to dominate his opponent, and gain the upper hand. Pun absolutely intended. This has a strong influence on Gon, where later in the Greed Island arc, Gon mirrors Hisoka's sacrifice against Genthru, throwing away a carefully thought out plan just to dominate his foe. But as if Hisoka was not already a masterpiece of a manga character, subverting a number of classical tropes and rules, Togashi decided to do something even more unusual. Based on his immense self-confidence and as a way to express his hedonism, Hisoka's character carries a very interesting sexual element as well. And yes, I know it's probably a bad idea discussing this, but hey, if you like Hisoka, that's part of his character as well. That guy literally flaunts it in everyone's face. It's like with real people, you only get them as a package.
興奮しちゃうじゃないか。
Deal with it. In general, in an industry that focuses heavily and often a bit too heavily on female sexuality, Hisoka is a rare case of a male being over-sexualized. Now this is especially interesting as Hunter x Hunter is still considered a part of shonen, a genre aimed at young boys with strong heroes fighting against evil. So not exactly a scenario that requires a sexy, somewhat queer man to be involved here. But here we are. This part of Hisoka's character is quite open for interpretation, and Togashi meant it to be that way. The main point, however, has surprisingly little to do with sexuality itself. Hisoka dressing and behaving the way he does are a visual representation of him not giving a fuck about the rules and embracing who he truly is at heart. And since he is a hedonic magician, well, that's what you get. For Hisoka, the line between sexuality and violence is quite fluid and often vanishes completely. Sigmund Freud would be proud. The much debated scene where he gets aroused just walking behind Killua and Gon can be interpreted in many ways, but what gets overlooked quite often is the fact that Hisoka gets aroused just by thinking about fighting Killua and Gon once they reach their peak in strength. And while this aspect of Hisoka might make some people uncomfortable, it's exactly what makes him such a fascinating character. Hisoka doesn't care what you think.
そんな目で見つめないでよ。興奮しちゃうじゃないか。
And so this refreshing role reversal serves as a central element underlining who Hisoka is as a person. Now, many of these central traits can also be found in the symbolism of his character that you might find this either very surprising or not at all, had some inspiration from the JoJo series. For example, a central theme for Hisoka throughout the story is the number 4, like the 44 name tag or his number 4 within the Phantom Troop. 4 is an unlucky number in Japan. Maybe you know that 4 is yon in Japanese, but there is a second word for 4, which is shi, which also means death. And death truly is all around Hisoka. Another theme is that of the clown, the fool or the joker, a very common trope in storytelling. However, Hisoka is not the warm-hearted fool, but the intelligent trickster.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
He is known for his intelligence, is close to unpredictable, and due to being non-conforming, incredibly irritating to anyone who follows the general rules of society. Next to Hisoka, another very famous example is the Joker from Batman, who has reached a similar level of popularity based on the very same traits. As a clown, Hisoka is of course also a performer. You only see him fighting in a serious manner when he's actually facing a very strong opponent, such as Chrollo. Otherwise, his focus is always on delivering a show for the audience, himself, and even for his opponents. always with another twist and another ace up his sleeve, guiding the audiences from act to act. If you want to go really meta here, you could even say that Togashi has created a storyteller within his own story. But even then, Hisoka is much more than an interesting character that enhances the story. He's a carefully crafted narrative tool, shaping the story and characters around him. Thus, Hisoka is perhaps one of the most subtle but also impactful examples of Togashi's writing brilliance. By making Hisoka purely hedonistic with no particular goal outside of being entertained, Hisoka can easily adapt to any purpose the story requires of him. He is a true wildcard, a true magician that can take on any role, be it ally or foe. He is the one that enabled Gon passing the Hunter exam, triggering his desire to become stronger, ultimately forcing him and Killua to master Nen. He is the one that tips off Kurapika about the gathering of the Phantom Troop. And on Greed Island, that already has a powerful antagonist, he happily takes the side of the protagonists to advance their respective interests. At the same time, Hisoka, right from the start, is shown to kill without warning or hesitation, always oozing bloodlust and, as mentioned, being fickle to the degree that you can never be sure when he will stop helping or what he's gonna be up to next. After being absent in the Chimera Ant arc, where he would probably have been a very bad fit, Hisoka reappears in the next arc as an antagonist to Killua and a force of nature during the Succession War arc.
僕は戦闘が好きで、ここは格闘の聖地だ。まさかその質問をするためだけにここへ来たわけじゃないだろ。僕がキラーをやるのは。
As much as he's able to seamlessly adapt to any story, he's also a wonderful tool to demonstrate the story's progression and to power scale the other characters. Due to his obsession with fighting, we see how powerful Hisoka is, giving us a great insight into many of the characters he encounters. Hisoka was always meant to be extremely strong, but not uber powerful, like Netero or Meruem. As a wildcard, he can be a powerful ally or villain, but is never meant to be the main antagonist. The reason he's so good at showing us the progression of the story and all the characters around him is not because of his ever-changing wardrobe, though let's be honest, it's always nice when anime characters bother to actually buy more than one set of clothes, not only fashion-wise, but also functionality-wise. Jesus, I mean, this is fashionable. Where was I going with this again? Oh, yeah. It's not because of fashion, but because of his flat character arc that Hisoka makes a great mark for character growth for Gon, Killua, and Co. Character arcs are always about a character believing something about the world that is false. In a positive arc like Killua's, it's about discovering this lie, rectifying it, and becoming a better person. In a negative arc like Gon's, at the moment of revelation, in this case his meeting with Pitou, this central moral insight fails to happen, and the character falls deeper into his lie, becoming a worse person for it. A flat character arc, therefore, belongs to one that already knows the truth. For Hunter x Hunter, this truth is the fact that people usually aren't either good or bad, they are gray and morally highly complex, driven by desires, thoughts, and the people around them. Gon fails to realize this and keeps believing that everyone is either black or white. Killua understands this after removing Illumi's needle and is finally able to love himself despite his faults. Hisoka, on the other hand, already knows who he is and what he wants. He's not held back by doubt or shame. Now obviously, just because a character understands the truth doesn't mean he always does the right thing. What makes flat character arcs interesting is how they act based on their insight. And so it often makes these characters a lot more versatile and complex, as they can use this truth to do both good or bad in the world. Thus, Hisoka isn't just this one-dimensional character as some people like to believe, which is why I love the shower scene, which might be the single most important moment of his character. The narrator is basically saying, sit back, turn off your brain, and enjoy the shit show that is Hisoka's life. And since Hisoka doesn't have to go through the same process of learning the truth anymore as the other characters, we can see their development in comparison to the constant that is Hisoka's character. And that brings me to the main point of this video. Based on all that we've talked about so far, all the fantastic writing and the character design, the thing that truly makes Hisoka a masterpiece of storytelling is the fact that you, dear viewer, are being manipulated by Hisoka as well. As am I. This becomes clear in all the controversy around him. We get so much mixed information about this man. Is he good or bad? A role model or the worst type of person? Relatable or repulsive? All these conflicting emotions are the true genius behind Togashi's writing. So, is Hisoka actually good at heart, but has a hard shell? Or is he actually just cruel and selfish to the core, manipulating us just like the other characters into thinking that he has a good side? Or something in between? We will probably never be able to tell. We love him for his cool manner and his fantastic fighting skills, but despise him for his cruelty and lies. And so, all we can really do is sit on the edge of our seats whenever he shows up, not knowing if we're gonna get the carrot or the stick. Togashi has created Hisoka to thrust the central moral argument of Hunter x Hunter into our faces. Human morality is complex, there is no clear black and white, so we might as well lean back and enjoy the shit show that is the life of Hisoka Morow.